So with that, let's welcome Byron to the screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen, and thank you for everyone who has joined today. This is a first for me. This is my first Zoom presentation, so I'm very gratified by the number of people that have shown up for this. Today's topic is just one of the many different activities that are on campus regarding sustainability, clean energy, energy efficiency, and the like. And so we're going to focus today on what has been probably our largest growth area in the last 4 to 5 years, and that is the electrification of transportation. Okay. Problem number 1.
All right, advancing your slide.
There you go.
Yeah.
So this is the way the California Energy Commission sees our future as a state. And ironically, that this is almost a mirror image of what our campus sees as our future as a 1,200 acre ecosystem. And that is the future electricity system will consist of near zero net energy buildings, high efficiency businesses, low carbon generation, sustainable bioenergy systems, more localized generation, and then today's topic, electrification of transportation. And all of this will be supported by a flexible and robust distribution, transmission, and infrastructure. And if we as a campus and we as a state or as a country or as a world can even start to achieve the different elements here, we'll be definitely moving towards our global climate initiatives. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the fact that the UC San Diego actually has a microgrid, and it's 62 megawatts in size. It's one of the largest in the country. And so we have a daily population of about 60,000 people, but our energy diet is 3 to 4 times that of a normal building structure. And that's due to our medical buildings, our air handling requirements for our labs, as well as our computers and the like. So we have over 16 million square feet of building on campus right now. And as you know, there's construction cranes everywhere. And that's about a $1 billion a year program of that capital construction. That's great for growth. However, in order to meet that future demand for energy on campus with all this growth, we have to be very creative with the ways that we generate it, import it, as well as utilize it on campus. And so that's the double-edged sword that we have with respect to growth on campus. Just to give you a high altitude overview of our EV infrastructure, and we'll be going into each of these. But throughout campus right now, we have over 230 commercial level 2 chargers. And level 2 chargers are kind of the medium range of kilowatts that can deliver to an electric vehicle for charging. We were the first North American demonstration of taking some high-powered DC fast chargers, each at 62 kilowatts. And then we actually can join and have them share their power up to 125 kilowatts when the stall next to them is vacant. So there's only 2 cars in the world right now that will take that much juice, and that's the Porsche Taycan as well as the Audi e-tron. However, the future is that more and more automobiles will in the future be able to take 125 kW. And for those automobiles, of the future, they will probably have a charging period of about 15 minutes to go from 20% to 80% charge. We have right now 19 demonstration and prototypes. We're looking forward to about over 50 more future generations. But of the current activity that we are charging right now, it's about 90 megawatts of energy per month. How much is 90 megawatts? If you're familiar with Galbraith Hall up in Revelle College, we are the equivalent of that building in EV charging. But the most significant number is that that growth rate is 6% per month. That's the equivalent of doubling every year. So originally when we started this program and had a few chargers on campus, people were very appreciative and they were finally getting the perk. Now with the growth and the acceptance of EVs, the campus population now sees having a charger available to them as an entitlement. So we are flapping our wings as fast as we can to try and keep up with this unprecedented growth. And we started this program by saying, well, let's do a field of dreams. Build it and they will come. Well, we found out the hard way. They do come. So we've renamed the program Tiger by the Tail, because that's the best way to describe how it's going on. So right now we have over 1,300 student, faculty, and staff that regularly commute to campus and utilize our charging stations per month. And that rate is also growing at 6% per month. So I'd love to sit here and say, I perfectly planned this. It's exactly the way I planned it to roll out, but I had no idea, no imagination that it would be this way. Now, part of that success has been, in the beginning, we had very, very lucrative offers by BMW, Daimler, Nissan, and in a lesser degree, Ford, offering UCSD student, faculty, and staff, in some case retirees, very, very attractive lease rates to get into an EV. And those dealerships locally became national leaders amongst their colleagues throughout the country in sales of EVs based upon our program. So what we found, and I'll show you in a little bit, there's an extremely high correlation between if people have affordability and accessibility to charging, then they purchase the EVs and they use the workplace as the primary source of their charging. So what our data is also showing is that the cadence by which people, basically the frequency by which our commuters are charging on campus, it infers that they either do not have access to home charging, or the price that we charge of 15 cents a kilowatt hour is more attractive than what they can charge at home. So the significance of this is that 55% of San Diego's population lives in multi-unit dwellings, apartments and condos. Generally speaking, those homes, apartments and condos do not have access to home charging. So you are forfeiting 55% of the market unless if you can provide an alternative to home charging. And having a robust, affordable, accessible workplace charging cracks that nut and opens the market to a much wider population, just to those who have the good fortune of living in a single family home. And then we'll be spending some time on how is the charging patterns and the charging rates good citizens with respect to the outside grid and the needs of that grid, what we call during grid incidents. And the most significant of those grid incidents is actually when there's a surplus of solar energy on the grid in the early morning through about 12 noon in certain periods of the time where we have so much solar energy on the grid, we either have to curtail it or export it to Arizona or to another place. So this is the challenge. We are constantly competing to keep the business of our commuters to use us as a workplace charging place. Because think of it like being a restaurant. If I don't provide great service at great prices and have clean, friendly people, etc., people will go elsewhere. And what this first paragraph really says is how fluid and flexible and whimsical that a driver can be as to where they charge. So we have to be familiar and always competing against home charging and other public charging. If we're not, our customers go elsewhere. We end up with stranded assets, with the charging station sitting there vacant when other people not driving an EV are looking for a parking space. That would be my worst nightmare. So we've had a good fortune, and you won't find a figure like this in the literature. What this is our customer retention profile, which basically we take every single unique driver and we log or we put in a bin the month and the year they first have a charge on campus. And the longest one is the bottom graphic there of that area graph. And you see from that the people who joined us in the very beginning and measured by kilowatt hours have been very loyal and consistently are coming back. The same thing with the second year, which is the next stack up. And I'm pathetically colorblind, so that's why I'll be calling these 1, 2, 3, and 4s rather than green, blue, yellow, and red. Because if I tried to call out the colors, then you'll really be confused. So, in the second year group, which lies on top, we're fairly stable. The third year, we had the big dip in the top is actually our winter break. But outside of that, we had a strong growth. And then when the COVID situation and closing down of the campus happened, we tumbled. And the campus is like a ghost town now. But customer retention, this graphic right here, is the name of the game for keeping other site hosts involved in this activity. So there's an old adage, when is the best time to plant a fruit-bearing tree? Was 5 years ago. And we had the good fortune back in 2014 where we were able to purchase 50 electric vehicles that you see running around campus here. We also had the opportunity to take advantage of a settlement agreement between NRG and the California Public Utilities Commission. And so it just had a nice confluence of good fortune back in 2014. So our growth is portrayed in this particular graphic, which shows how with time, depending upon which type of charger that we have on campus, how that growth has occurred. And I've drawn little banners there as to explain when the big breaks have corresponded to winter, summer break, and the like. So this, again, it's doubling every year. Now the legend down below shows the diversity and the size of the number of corporate players looking to demonstrate their technology on campus. UC San Diego has the largest, most diversified portfolio of EV charging stations at any location in the world. And so they come here, we install them, and then our commuters will patronize them. If they like them, they'll keep using that station. If they don't like them, they'll go elsewhere. But they get a tremendous amount of embedded use that they can't get anywhere else from ordinary commuters. So the rate of growth is, in my favorite little chart here, so these are all the different types of people. And this gives you an idea of when they came to campus, what the growth rate was, and you can see how they start to overtake one another. That is market validation of what people liked, didn't like, stopped using, kept using, used more of. And some of these were smaller volumes of chargers, but overall, it shows how busy bees we are of people going over from one charging plaza to another, from Osler to Gilman to wherever. And lo and behold, their strong preference right now is using the charge points. And but coming up strong is the EDF and the PowerFlex that I'll talk about in a little bit. So what we found and what I alluded to in the past is for every one charger that we put in, signified here in the blue area graph, we have about 8 new commuters. And those are the commuters that stay with us as loyal customers. So as we keep growing and putting in more chargers, we have more workplace commuters. And then the research program. You'll see around campus a number of these signs where they're dedicated to designated drivers who are participating in a test automobile, and they will be performing functions as complex as vehicle to grid. Vehicle to grid is when you can charge a car like normal, but in a grid incident, you could feed electricity back into the grid if you so elected, or if you were provided an incentive to feed electricity back in the grid during a grid incident. Or if you go home and there's a blackout, you can plug it into your home and you have a backup energy storage system. So rather than having an energy storage system in your garage hanging on the wall, you actually have an energy storage system for your home sitting on 4 wheels and available to you when your car is at home. So let's talk about environment here. The California Air Resources Board has broken an annual year, 2020, into 4 quarters and then by hour, starting at midnight, working its way down to 11:55 p.m. And through historical data, they have determined when and of what value is what they call the carbon index. How much carbon is in the electricity on the grid? And if you look down on the quarter one, around 10 p.m., you see there's 124 value of carbon on the grid. But then look in Q2 at about 8 to 10 p.m., 10 a.m., the values are 1/60th of that. That is when we have so much solar energy on the grid that we don't know how to utilize it all. So the carbon index is lower. So there's a thing called a low carbon fuel standard, where CARB will pay us a certain amount of money if we consume more electricity, like you see in Q2, in the morning, than utilizing electricity, like you see at the bottom of Q1. So we have an hourly price schedule. And so what we tried to do is orchestrate all of our charging to compress into the most valuable hours. It has the greatest environmental benefit and the greatest economic benefit. So I forever want to be known as the individual who invented the EV happy hour, because that's exactly what it is. We want to suck up as much electricity as we possibly can in those periods without disrupting customer service. So here's a graphic of that, an ideal graphic of compressing as much charging activity into those hours, both on the upper left and at the bottom right, which is a new technology that we're using from Electricity de France and a local company by the name of PowerFlex, where they are able to adjust on a 15-minute basis the charging rate to all of the different chargers. And so they just merely modulate. They never turn a charging session off. They merely lower it down. And if there's a EV happy hour, they modulate it up. And so by doing this, we're able to allow our drivers right now at Athena to stay in their stalls for 12 hours, as opposed to the normal of 2 to 4 hours, which is very inconvenient in the middle of the day to go move your car and try and find an open parking space at noon at UCSD. Good luck with that. So we're trying to accommodate our drivers by maximizing our revenue, maximize environmental benefit, and maximize convenience to our drivers. And so here's an example. This is a layered graph, one day after layered on the other with PowerFlex. And what you begin to see is, you see a little ridge rising about noon, and think of it as a backbone. And so what we're doing without the drivers knowing it, day by day, we are moving that peak periods of time from a non-happy hour time into a happy hour time. And so this is all being done without the awareness by the driver and without inconveniencing them in terms of being done by their desired departure time. You won't find this graph anywhere in the literature either. As a result, we earn about $35,000 a quarter, in the California Air Resources Board credits. And that money then goes back into providing more chargers on campus. And it also goes back to, again, the ratio for every new charger we put in, we get about 8 new drivers. So this conforming to the EV happy hour produces revenue that then enables a priming of the pump to produce more chargers on campus. Other research. This was a first of the kind in the country. It combined photovoltaics, a second life EV battery to control the energy load, and DC fast chargers. This was out in P703 on East Campus. It had 4 units, and we decommissioned it in September of last year. And ironically, we decommissioned it the same time that Elon Musk was announcing that their supercharger stations were going to this design. And so, I jokingly said, well, if Elon Musk has caught up to us, we better hurry up and go to our next generation of innovation. But the fact is, the grant on this program expired. Here's another program that you might be familiar with, the Triton Rides program. It's basically an Uber convenience to student, faculty, and staff on campus. If you wish to get a ride from, let's say, Geisel over to the dorms at the night, you don't want to walk, you call Triton Rides, they come pick you up, deliver you. So they're primarily a nighttime courtesy service. And when they're through, they come back to this plaza that you see right here, and they plug in their Nissan Leafs. Well, this is the vehicle to grid program. So during the day, they are being charged because they're not being used. They're plugged in. And during grid incidences, they can also deliver power back in to the grid. So it's bidirectional. We call it V to G, vehicle to grid. We are one of 5 demonstration sites in the world for Nissan. And right now, if you own a Nissan and you plugged it into a vehicle to grid, you would violate your warranty, void your warranty. However, if the results of these 5 demonstration projects prove that the degradation of the EV's battery is not significant enough to matter, then Nissan is likely to project of saying our automobiles are capable of vehicle to grid as long as you use our charging stations. So this will enable, and think of it this way, if you're debating between a Nissan and let's say a Chevy Bolt. Chevy Bolt doesn't have the vehicle to grid feature, but the Nissan does, and they're about the same price. What car are you going to buy? If you want that security in these times of wildfires, outages, and etc., that vehicle to grid feature is worth its weight in gold. We also have about 5 miles down the street off campus, east of us, we have our shipping and receiving facility. And all the things that come to campus is brought here first and then loaded into these marketplace trucks. We are in the process of electrifying these trucks that will then be coming to campus with 0 emissions. Big data, for those of you who are involved, is extremely valuable. And it's a whole nother topic to talk about the unique consumer behavior that we're learning about of how, when, where, and who charge and the fashion that they charge. ChargePoint has provided us with 4 years of user data in the entire San Diego region. And so we can compare our performance on campus to the outside world. Now, when I talk about consumer behavior, what have we learned? I'd say one of the major things we've learned is that these charging stations were not designed by women. Because we are perceiving a difference in gender, in charging patterns and preferences. Most specifically, the higher the site security, the greater the female patronage to a plaza versus one that has poor site security, personal security. And so we're seeing other patterns that are non-gender, age, and mileage from campus. So as as much as we wonk on the technology aspect, we have even a greater knowledge base now with all the charging activity, with how this new breed of consumers are doing charging. And then another issue that's very important to us, and that is the environmental justice of electric vehicles. And as this graphic shows, there's a heavy population of charging stations north of 8 and very few south of 8. And as a result, the access to public charging is limited. It's a disincentive. An EV costs more. And so many people who live in disadvantaged communities, which is a term California Energy Commission uses for underserved communities, do not have access to be a part of this evolution of EVs. And we're trying to change that. UC San Diego has over 2,000 employees who live in disadvantaged communities. The California Energy Commission is about to donate 10 cars to our campus. We plan to have a ride and drive for some of those residents where they would have access to an EV for 2 weeks to carpool, to drive, soccer moms, whatever. And then we're going to see if that experience leads them to buying either a new or used EV or leasing one. So we're trying to think that if they're exposed to the experience and the carpool lanes and the other advantages, and with the knowledge they have is that there's affordable and accessible charging on campus, then in the similar fashion, the way we've penetrated the multifamily dwelling market, we're hoping to penetrate the disadvantaged community markets. And there are things that we need to inform these individuals in a program called Cash on the Hood, which is the rebate program is you pre-qualify for the California rebate that ranges from $2,500 to $6,000 per vehicle. And rather than waiting 60 days to get your check, if you pre-qualify, you get a voucher and you can go down and use that voucher as your down payment. You can't do it if you don't know about it. So anyway, this is a major effort as well of what we're trying to do is broaden, deepen, and accelerate the base of the users. One thing that I really didn't anticipate, and that is the extensive amount of international collaboration. Every single one of these companies here have a dominant role on campus, and they're all overseas companies. And then the ultimate electrification of transportation is the San Diego Light Rail, which will be coming to campus in 2021. So with that, I thank you for your attention, participation, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you so much, Byron. That was wonderful. Deborah?
Yeah, Byron, well, first of all, Byron, you may not appreciate your place in the series of talks that we've had, but I hope the students and some of our repeated visitors are starting to get the sense of what we're trying to show here is what a unique place UC San Diego is. So we've heard from people who are senior in their research career and are on the academic senate. We've heard from the director of the design lab. We've heard how a faculty designs their psychology course to kind of think of activism for climate change. But now we get to see also what it means for a university to actually not just pay lip service to an issue, but actually demonstrate it and work on it in its own facilities. And I think this is a really nice example. And you already alluded to some of the things, Byron. The fact that you are in a research university I would like you also to think, to say some comments, not only what it allows you to do in terms of the research and the demonstration projects, but also are there opportunities for students, even undergrad or graduate students, to participate in research that's related to your efforts?
Yes, there are. In terms of if they work for me in my programs, that they have to be an intern to which they're paid, and so that's really the volume there is budget. And so, but if people want to continue to work, there's opportunity to volunteer through a faculty program, or they can use it as their capstone project if they have one as well. I personally have 3 interns, and they humble me every week. And like all of my low carbon fuel standard activity is managed by a rising senior intern. And a lot of my data analysis, you saw that all those beautiful graphics, is currently a sophomore.
Very cool.
And so I can't get enough of them, to work. But I have to do it within the rules. And so if someone wants to volunteer and participate by being affiliated with it, then find a faculty member that will basically be their.
Are those the kind of 199s, independent studies, or 198,
Yes.
things like that? Yeah,
Right,
okay. Yeah,
right.
That's great.
Or their capstone projects.
Very nice. We have a comment here, question from Russell. He says, given that most of the electric grid in San Diego is powered by fossil fuels, primarily natural gas presumably, do we know how much actual carbon reduction is achieved by electric vehicles usage as compared to diesel or gasoline, especially considering transmission and conversion losses?
Okay. Let's rewind a little bit. When I was back on the microgrid, I didn't give the microgrid due justice. We self-generate 80% of all of our own electricity on an annual basis.
Through solar or?
Well, it's a combination of, we have the world's largest commercially available fuel cell that uses directed biogas from the Point Loma wastewater treatment plant. That's 2.8 megawatts. We have 3 megawatts of photovoltaics. We have 27 megawatts of high efficiency gas turbines. And we have the largest battery storage system at any university in the world at 2.5 megawatts, 5 megawatt hours. The 20% of electricity that we import is almost 100% renewable energy. We are what's called a direct access customer. So we purchase wholesale the electricity of choice. And our electricity of choice is a green electron. And so that supply of importing to our campus is virtually 100% renewables. The reason why I say virtually is some of it is contained large hydro, which is not regarded as a renewable in the state of California.
Very interesting. Tell me something. You just mentioned at the end that the light rail is coming, and it's part of kind of the electrifying of transportation. What do you see? What do you anticipate will happen to the actual driving and transportation and parking patterns on campus? Do you have any sense for what to anticipate?
Well, every question that we answer these days are bifurcated to pre-March and post-March.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID and post-COVID. Pre-COVID, the plan and the anticipation is that we would still, from North County, still have that volume of traffic coming to campus. And with our growth rate in mandatory student participation as well as growth rate in new faculty and staff, we would have an increase in commuter traffic. The light rail was to relieve the south of campus along the connector lines that flow, including from south of 8. That was the pre-COVID plan. The post-COVID plan is that we don't know. It is very suspect right now that people will be prone to using mass transit too soon after we get out of this current stage, where people will be reluctant to ride the bus. They would prefer to ride their individual car. They will be reluctant to do casual carpools, or as one comment that I read just yesterday was, I only want to carpool with someone who lives in my same house. And so we might see an unfortunate spike in commuter traffic and a reduction in our bus and mass transit afterwards. How it plays out, nobody really knows.
I have one more last question before we turn it over to the audience. And I feel like I had a vague kind of gestalt sense of what you were talking about when you did the happy hour routine, but also afterwards when you described how you could move patterns of chargers without people knowing about it. You had this you had this graph with the ridge at noon. Would you mind even maybe going back to that slide and give us a little bit more or a second round of that? Thanks. Yeah.
So what PowerFlex does is when you pull into the station, unique from any other unit that we have on campus, and that is you use your cell phone on the cue card, which identifies you as the driver, and it asks you 2 questions. What is your desired mileage to be added? And when is your departure time? Okay, with those 2 variables, PowerFlex then says, okay, I look at all 27 chargers in my plaza, and I'm going to optimize. If you, Deborah, roll up in a Tesla and you're empty and you want 150 miles added and you're going to be departing at 11 a.m., you skew it to the left. Other people who aren't leaving till 6 p.m. are skewed to the right. And so we're able to manage this in a symphony-like orchestration so that by the time you're ready to leave, be it 11 a.m. or 6 p.m., your charging objectives have been met for your departure time as well as the miles added. And so you're not being bugged with constant text messages like you are on so many other services, like deals here, deals that, do this and that. I mean, your text message alarm system and ringing is almost like a symphony in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
So the consumer is interested in those 2 things. How we do it, as long as it's not to the detriment of the automobile, the consumers are indifferent to that.
Nice. But they entered at the beginning, so I missed the part that they get to enter kind of their
I failed to
desire.
mention
Yeah.
that.
Okay,
I failed
cool.
to mention that.
Cool.
So
Okay,
we have
Colleen,
2.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
we have 2 questions. One is from Frederick, and Frederick, I'm going to call on you if you're comfortable. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask the question, and maybe even turn on your video. And Frederick was having trouble raising his hand, and I can't find how to do it. And I don't know if it's because I'm host now, but if somebody else can just speak up and say how you raise your hand, that would be great. So maybe I gave 2 instructions. So first, let's have Frederick ask his question, and then we'll figure out how to hand raise. So Frederick, if you're out there.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. I was looking at the data on air now and the AQI levels, and there doesn't seem to be a significant difference between the AQI levels prior to COVID and post-COVID. And I was wondering why that was the case.
Yeah, by AQ levels, what do you mean by AQ?
The air quality levels, the AQI.
Oh,
I think you
okay.
mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, this is based on, you see the 2020, at the beginning of the year, the California Air Resources Board takes the historical performance of the carbon index, i.e. how much fossil fuel, how much renewables.
Mm-hmm.
And based upon historical, they, at the beginning of the year, they produced this chart that you see right here. Now, where we're going to get to in the future is this chart is going to become a real-time chart. And so we're going to have to pivot, or in some case pirouette, on an hourly basis and readjust how we're going to scheme. So this is a static graph for applicable to 2020, but in the future, we will have it real time.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking at airknowledge.gov, and there's real-time statistics based on air quality that I'm getting. Like, for instance, Napomo, California is at 100, and prior to COVID, it was at 70. So I was wondering what external factors may play a role in the worse air quality now.
Well, it will. And also one of the things that we're finding is we're having to curtail more and more renewables because energy demand is down. But those solar systems continue to pump out electricity, as do the wind. And so they're actually curtailing. I think last month was our all-time highest curtailment of renewable energies in the state of California,
Awesome.
which is a mortal sin in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Frederick. All right, so Marty Turok, you have your hand up, and I was wondering if maybe you could unmute your speaker and turn on your camera, if you're comfortable with that.
All right, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes, thank you.
And I'm not going to turn on the camera because I'm backlit and I look like Darth Vader, but
Okay, sounds good.
Hi, Byron, how are you?
Very good, Marty. How are you?
I am doing well. My question for you is the warranty issue the biggest thing that's holding back proliferation of V2G now? Are there other regulatory and policy issues? And between the two of those, what's kind of the outlook of when you think it will be monetizable?
Two quick answers to that. First of all, the warranty is the dominant issue. If all of a sudden, you know, the 60% of the value of your car evaporates because you plug in and a V2G, people are going to be very hesitant about that.
Yeah.
So that's an economic issue. The second issue is from a regulatory point of view in the state of California for all inverters, and chargers are regarded like an inverter, are subject to new standards of interoperability, performance, and communications. No vendor right now who provides V2G chargers has certified their equipment as Rule 21.
Okay.
So those vendors need to catch up to the existing regulatory program. The policy issue, which then translates into what economic incentive can be given a driver if the grid needs it. As an example, let's say your car is full and you get a text message saying, can we consume 20 kilowatt hours from your vehicle and we'll pay you 3 times the price it cost you to put in. And you go 3 to 1, maybe. And then if not enough people accept the offer, it will be arbitrage where the utility will come back and say, all right, we'll pay you 4 to 1, 5 to 1, 6 to 1. How desperate do you get?
Yep.
And so eventually individual drivers are going to have an arbitrage of deciding whether or not they want to provide any electricity at all into the grid. And it will only be on an opt-in basis. And so unless if you push the accept on price, you're not participating. How a utility can offer you that price has not yet been structured. So that's a policy issue.
Okay. And,
But,
and with
but
your,
unless if we show the technology, the technical feasibility of behaving this way, those other 3 points become moot.
right. And your pilot with Nissan, how long is that going to have to go before they'll feel they've got enough data to make a decision?
That's a very good question. And Nuvi, one of your companies under your tutelage,
Yep.
is our prime contractor on that. Nissan and Hitachi, the vendor of the charging equipment, they're collecting and observing the data.
Yep.
When and how and what they decide will be, I'll probably learn about it at the same time you do.
Okay.
But Nissan has made a teaser announcement down in Australia and one teaser announcement in Europe that they're going to be offering vehicle to grid. But they are so extremely protective of their brand name. They're very conservative and risk averse to having any possible issues with their automobile, battery fires, you name it. So their conservatism is understood.
Cool. If there are no hand
Great.
raises, there are a few more comments. Colleen, do you have a?
I don't have any more hand raises.
Okay,
So
so
go
let
ahead.
me, Lucas is saying, what is UCSD's plan to transition its microgrid away from relying largely on natural gas?
Well, the plan is by 2025, ourselves, like all the other UC campuses, are under an unfunded mandate to be carbon neutral. So that sets our time schedule by which we have to do one of two things. One will be to procure enough directed biogas, the same way we run our fuel cell, to operate our gas turbines. Failing that or partially succeeding that, you would fulfill that mandate with the need to buy low carbon fuel standards as an offset. So we're under a tremendous pressure to find available sources of directed biogas, which is renewable gas, as well as to potentially buy low carbon fuel standards to offset it.
Interesting. So there's a comment here from Brianna saying, in terms of fewer people carpooling, I think it's also possible that fewer people will be driving at all this year. Do you have a, does that match your sensibilities, or do you have a?
It's, we don't know. We don't know how many students will return. What we do know is that the occupancy that we'll have students per room in the dorms, we're kind of what is called decompress the occupancy in the dorms, the amount of online teaching, the return of postdocs and researchers, which currently are not available or have access to their laboratories. The crystal ball is very murky.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so another one, we'll know about the same time you observe.
Right.
So one last question from Gary. He says, in terms of demand, popularity, and design, what do we really learn from people using free charging stations on campus, since the costs relative to market alternatives dominate and thereby warp demand greatly? Are there conclusions beyond females not liking the dark and remote sites? Or what is it, beyond females not liking dark remote sites?
Right.
Yeah. First of all, let me clarify that except for a couple of prototypes that we have on campus that are for demonstration purposes, the vast majority of our 250 plus chargers do charge a retail fee, and that's 15 cents a kilowatt hour. And the prevailing average rate in Power Your Drive with San Diego Gas and Electric for home charging is about 19 cents a kilowatt hour. So I don't want to leave the false impression that it's free on campus, except for these demonstration projects, which we're trying to get patronage to them, primarily just to acquire data points. So I call that the price of a data point. Going back to the question about security for females, I'll use my wife as an example. She said, with respect to a DC fast charger, she said, what you're asking me to do is to pull into a lot I might not be familiar with, get out of my car and do something the equivalent of doing something underneath the hood. Get back in my car, sit in my car for 15 to 30 minutes, maybe longer, then get out of my car, do something again underneath the hood of my car, get back in and drive away. She looked me straight in the eye and said, I wouldn't even do that in my Ralph's supermarket, let alone in a parking spot where I'm unfamiliar with. And so as a result, we need to put more security cameras on our parking stalls. We need to have them cleaner, better lit, more in the flow of traffic, a high trafficked area, let's say towards the entrance of a parking structure, rather than out in left field. So all of these issues come to the front as you get the volume of traffic that we get, and we have a very vocal group of male, females, and otherwise on campus who let you know what they like and what they don't like about the systems. We're all ears when it comes, because that will lead to, and this is the point, and maybe we can end with, that will lead to a better design that will meet customer satisfaction.
I was thinking that it might be a good place to do some robotics technology where you don't have to get out of your car to actually do the fitting between the receptor and the whatever cable that gives you the.
And that day will come when a snake-like cord will come out and serpentine its way over to your plug-in station, and you'll push a button inside the car, and then it will bead right in like a docking station.
Yeah.
Right.
Would be
So
fun
Byron,
if would be fun if contextual robotics at UCSD was the one to do it with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
And so wait, so Byron, you said something at the beginning, and this is just a really quick one, and then we can end it. But you said portable early on when you were talking about charging stations. You don't like literally, did I mishear that? Or are these stations something that
I'm
are
sorry,
literally
I
portable?
said ports. Ports.
Oh, ports, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
each plug
so I
is a port.
misunderstood.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, that's great. Yeah, and I think this is a great opportunity for, say, people that are studying, you know, how people go about their daily lives and how they see their interactions with these kinds of systems, or how they park, or what their behaviors are, in terms of things that are more than just pricing and security and things too. So it's a great opportunity.
And also there, just one last thing, all of our chargers represent shared use opportunities. And we have people who learned how to share when they were young and practice it as an adult. And we have the flip side. And the flip side, a very small minority of our commuters are the exhibit bad behavior when it comes to sharing.
Mhm.
We call them stall nappers,
Okay.
where they overstay their welcome after a session has ended. But again, how do you deal with all of these different, it's a non-homogeneous group, to be sure.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, this was really wonderful. Thank you so much for the opportunity to hear this talk.
Okay, my pleasure, and thank you all for tuning in, and I hope that every time you drive by a charging station, you have a little smile on your face.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much, Byron.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you.
everyone.
Thank
Good.
you.